Simon Carless is, in my opinion, the leading expert on indie game discoverability and marketing. So when he asked me if I'd be interested in an interview, of course I said yes. I asked my students on the Games of Unlocked Discord server what their best, hardest questions were regarding indie marketing in 2021. And here are the top 10 most popular entries. Definitely don't forget to subscribe to Simon's newsletter, Game Discover Co. It's free, and it's probably the most important information you can learn if you really want to make a living selling your game. Now, on to the questions. All right, we got Simon here. Super excited for this. I'm a huge fan of Simon's work. He has the Game Discover Code newsletter, which I just talked about. And yeah, Simon, what could you tell us about yourself?
Well, firstly, it's great to be here. And a little background on me. I guess I did used to develop and design video games in the 90s and early zeros. But for the past few years, I was sort of behind the scenes on the Independent Games Festival and Game Developers Conference. So that's been a lot of my history. But then I got involved even more into indie via helping out with No More Robots, who are an English publisher. I was one of the original investors in that. And now I run my own newsletter and company called Game Discover Co. And it's all about how people find and play and buy your games, because I think it's a really interesting and complicated subject.
That's awesome. And that's like indie marketing moves so fast. Like it changes. Like I released the first tree on Steam in 2017. And even just since then, it's so different now. It's so much has changed. And that's why it's like, I love your newsletters because they're very relevant, up to date with the new trends going on. And so I did ask the Games of Unlocked students, like their most, what's the most popular, hardest marketing questions they have. And you have the most relevant information. So I wanted to start by asking you the first one, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. What would be the first thing for a solo indie developer to focus on for marketing? I'm curious to know how one starts at ground zero and reaches an audience. There are, of course, many ways, but would love to hear about what he would recommend us to focus on.
Sure. So, I think a real good starting point is talking about your game's hook. I'm kind of like a discovery guy. And by discovery, I mean, how do people find out about your game? And often it's you have a viral idea or you have an interesting idea behind your game. So I do think it's a really good idea to think about your game and your marketing as two things that very much interact with each other, not just two completely separate things like, I'm going to develop now and then I'm going to do the marketing. So I think, finding a good hook, and by a good hook, I mean something where someone looks at that game and says, oh, that game's got a fresh idea, or that game's a twist on something I really liked. I think that's a great starting point. And then I think the next thing for me, depends on how long you're making the game for, but really getting a good vertical slice of gameplay working and getting just one level that doesn't need to look like the final game, but it can look pretty good. And then you can really go out there and you can announce your game, and you can put up a Steam page if you're going to put it on Steam, and you can do a YouTube trailer, and you can maybe email some media outlets and set up your Discord. So I'm a big fan of really getting out there and sort of trying to coordinate a launch for your game. You can talk about it a bit beforehand, but having a launch where maybe you can try and get Rock, Paper, Shotgun to pick up on your game, or you can put a trailer out there. And, obviously we're not expecting everyone to get 100,000 views on their trailer, but it just sort of starts. It's a good line in the sand for kind of like a starting point. So I think if you can still start there and then start interacting with your Discord, have some private or public demos of your game, maybe start talking to streamers about your game, try and show them early versions, and do a little bit of social media, and then just keep trying to find the newest and best ways of attracting people into your community, like using Reddit or TikTok or Imager or being in Steam Next Fest. There's so many games out there, but there's also so many potential players, and that's what makes the space so exciting.
Yeah, it can be an overwhelming amount of like marketing avenues though. Like, do you think, and I'm just having a discussion, because these are the questions I get. I get asked a lot, like, do I have to do it all? Do I have to have 10 different social media accounts? Like, does it depend on the genre of game, whether you should focus on Discord or whether you should focus on Reddit?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake to try and tick all the boxes. So I definitely agree with your students or other folks there. I think it's a good idea to try and pretty ruthlessly prioritize the stuff that might make a difference. And for me right now, I think the stuff that seems to make a difference is, basing your community around Discord is great, because then you can always go back and ask them questions. And, it's just a great, that's almost not marketing. That's almost like a way to make your game better. It is also marketing, I guess. So I think, if you prioritize that and then streamers and streamer outreach, I think those are the things that can often make a difference if you have a streamer friendly game. And I think other things are important, but sometimes we do overrate other things. A good example, I think, is Twitter. Like, Twitter is great, and it's often great for all of us personally, because we can tweet stuff on there. We can feel like it gets retweets and people care about the game. And I think so it's good for morale, but I'm not sure Twitter is always the best for actually translating well to sales. And I've seen some games recently that I've worked with publishers on that have had very poor Twitter performance and then have sold hundreds of thousands of copies. So I think it's a good idea to understand, like, each of these areas is kind of a filter bubble. Then you just need to work out, is the filter bubble on TikTok or Twitter or Reddit the right filter bubble for your game, and how does it really translate to people actually wanting to play or buy your game later?
Yeah, you got to try it out, and you have to experiment, I think, and it can be overwhelming at first, but then you find out what works for you. And like for me, like the first tree, I did numbers on Twitter and Tumblr and Reddit and Imgur, but I found out later that it was just Reddit and Imgur that made the huge difference in sales. And I didn't know that until I tried out the other platforms. So yeah, you got to try them out, I guess. Should we move on to the next question? All right. What is Simon's advice on one-man studios like me who are new to this world and do not have that much content to market? Should we leave marketing alone at first and focus on the learning production parts and then jump back to marketing later? Or should we market right from the beginning with anything we have?
So I think it's good, as I said, to think of marketing as sort of an extension of what I call discovery. And I think as soon as you reveal the game, you should think a bit about marketing it all the time. But my personal view is that you should really only reveal your game when you have something that kind of looks a little bit competitive. So, I know a lot of people will be like tweeting or updating their blog all the way from like, here's the first stuff I put in the engine. And I think that's like, okay. But I almost think it's better to start out, like, wait maybe 3 to 6 months and then actually start talking about it more publicly when you've actually got a trailer together and you can sort of attract people in with a good description of what the game is and what its unique selling points are. Because I think it's okay to say, look, my game exists, and that's what you're sort of doing if you're doing really early development. But I think it's better to say, like, yeah, here's something that you might consider buying based on even this trailer, and you might like it because these reasons. So I think it's better to wait a little bit and then do that. But equally, when I say wait a little bit, I still want everyone to announce their game like 12 months before it comes out. So I guess it's difficult because it's like, well, you want to wait, but then you don't want to wait till 2 months before it comes out, because you'll lose a lot of the momentum that you're really getting from announcing a long time before it's released. So
yeah, I think for the first tree, it was like a tortoise and the hare kind of situation. Because I did what you said. I did 6 months just making the game. Like, not a soul knew about it at that point. And then I spent 12 months, just 2 hours a week, really marketing, and that involved making GIFs and posting them. And I did that for a year. Like, it was 12 months, but it was only like an hour or two a week. And I think that added up. There was a lot of failed GIFs, a lot of failed posts everywhere, but the ones that did stick, it did get me enough wish lists eventually to get on the front page of Steam on launch, that was the goal, and it made the biggest difference in the world. But yeah, you have to market now. You absolutely have to. It's just too competitive. You'll get buried on Steam too fast, I think.
Yeah, and I think a good thing to think about is always like, what I'm putting out, like, why would people care about it? Like, are you announcing this stuff just so you can keep yourself going on development, or are you really announcing it from the point of view of someone who hasn't seen my game before might look at this and say, hey, that looks kind of cool. So I think that's sort of the minimum bar. And as soon as you reach that minimum bar, you should be doing something every week until launch. I completely agree.
Cool. All right. Moving on to the third question. How do we reach our audiences rather than other game devs? I feel a lot of the initial followers we get are also indie devs, which isn't necessarily our game's target market.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely true. There's been some pretty funny memes about this on Twitter in particular. I think Twitter is particularly prone to this, which is there's a lot of excellent game devs on Twitter who love looking at other people's games. And yeah, if you're getting 50 retweets every time for your tweets, is it like 49 other game devs and one person? And that is often the concern. So I think like you said, when you're making the first tree, I think if you can vary the platforms you're putting it out on and do more Imager and Reddit and TikTok, I'm a fan of the kind of more visual mediums now, because I think the whole internet is moving to being quite a visual medium. So I think stuff where you can see video of the game or at least GIFs of the game is really good. So if you're putting a bunch of stuff out there on Twitter and you're always getting interest, but you're not getting interest on the other platforms, then that might be an indication that you're accidentally maybe showing too much of the nuts and bolts of making the game and not really making things that are kind of attractive enough. So I think that's something to really think about carefully. But a lot of it's down to the kind of genre of game you're making as well. And so I do think it's a real good idea to look carefully at what's popular on Steam. And I look a lot at tags on Steam, and there's some websites which will show you the kind of the average revenue for each Steam tag. And so you can start getting an idea of like, what's a really interesting game, but there's actually not many others like it, because the danger is always, if you're making something like Hades style game, then I just feel like it's very, very crowded and there's already some front runners. So I think some of it is, and game devs may not notice this because they'll just feedback on the quality of the thing, but it's the quality, but it's also the kind of field you're running in. Are you like in the Olympic finals, or are you at your local sack race or local kind of sprint race with only people from the area, right?
Yeah, exactly. I had a theory, and I wanted to see what you thought about this theory. Twitter is very game dev centric, and I do agree. Like, I've had amazing connections with people in the industry because of Twitter. I don't know exactly how many sales I've earned from Twitter. Like, I do have a big launch GIF, and that would get 1,000 retweets, and I think that helped a little bit. But here's my theory. While there are a lot of game devs on Twitter, and we retweet each other's stuff, other gamers follow other game devs, right? Is that so even if there's a game dev bubble, it still reaches out to people who are buying lots of games? Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I do think like Twitter is still on my list of platforms that I think you should do. So I'm definitely not in the kind of this is a waste of time. And also, honestly, any affirmation you get for your game is nice. And there's a lot of people who are going to make great games who, they want people to say they like them. So putting it on Twitter is great. I think the danger is when you think the sum total of your, in quotes, marketing campaign is your Twitter account. And then you just don't have a chance to kind of branch out and do other stuff. And particularly, I think, Twitter is quite, some people run just Twitter and they don't run a Discord, for example. And I think that's definitely not good, because I think for a Discord, you will get more fans coming along. And even if you only have a few of them, it's really great to interact with them, bounce off ideas for your game and get into that kind of swift kind of iteration. And I think a lot of the best games do a lot of iteration with their fans, whether you have 300 or 300,000 during development of the game, because they will really help you refine your ideas and make good comments. So I think, and Twitter is more about showing things, I think, to people, showing work in progress. So yeah, so I think Twitter is fine, and you're right, it does have some reach, and it definitely, getting 1,000 retweets on it means that you have a very jiffable game. Having a very jiffable game versus selling, there's not a one-to-one comparison with that, but it certainly helps. So definitely worth doing, I think.
Cool. No, that's interesting answer. Thank you. I will keep doing Twitter, but sometimes, I don't know. It's great for developers, but I do think most of the success I've seen is from Imager and Reddit. And now, if I were to start over, because 2021 is so different than 2017, I would probably start doing TikTok. TikTok is very organic, reach is awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big TikTok fan, particularly because a lot of these other platforms, like the Instagrams of this world, you do need to have a lot of followers to go viral. But TikTok's algorithm is so so capricious and kind of not random, but it can pluck stuff from any account. So I've seen a lot of devs who have TikToks, and you look at their views, and it's kind of like 200 views, 400 views, 400,000 views. And you can do that if you have something that people want, like keep watching or hearting, or So I think that's the exciting thing about TikTok. You don't have to have an account with a lot of big following to blow up TikTok sometimes.
That's cool. That's really exciting. I'm glad it exists, because it's getting harder and harder with organic reach. But all right, okay, moving on. How much time should you put into actual game development versus marketing your game? Is there a recommended percentage or hours per week?
I mean, I think you already said, like, 2 or 3 hours a week, if nothing else, is a good starting point. And I really think it's a good idea to kind of like, sometimes I feel like a lot of these questions still, as I said earlier, sort of treat development and marketing as two different tasks. And that's not, I don't think that's, in my view, that's how you should see it. They need to be a little bit closer together than that. So it's kind of like, some of your week might be, polling anyone you have on your Discord about what new features you should put in the game, or maybe you should be showing them some different GIFs and seeing what they think, and just trying to get it more organic and community based. I think is a really good way to go, because then your work in progress stuff will be more meaningful. But I think in terms of the real, I'm contacting streamers now, or I'm posting on Reddit now. I think you can certainly try and do that for 2 or 3 hours every week, and it will not hurt, and it in fact will probably get you better at doing it, because you'll get feedback and you'll keep iterating on the marketing as well as the game.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I love about social media and marketing is you make this game idea up. You don't know if people would actually buy it. You just don't. Like, in your head, it sounds like a great game. And then you can actually test it out online. And if people upvote it or like it, that is at least a little bit of proof that the idea is somewhat viable and that maybe they would buy the game. And if it's not reaching many people, even with the hashtags, and people just are kind of going, like that's okay, then that's probably a reflection of how it will do on launch day, So it's good to get that information ahead of time before you commit to a 2-year project. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and I'm actually a fan of, there are some studios starting to think about this. You can start talking about your game concept before you have everything done, or you could even just go to vertical slice on a couple of different projects and see how people respond to them if you have the ability to spin up vertical slices pretty quickly. Because I think that's really good, because there were some companies out there right now on the Steam marketplace who are doing like target gameplay trailers for their game, like actually before they've coded the entire game, because they want to see how people respond to it. And that's a little bit borderline for me, but I'm just noting that like companies definitely think this is a good idea, and you can definitely get part of the way through understanding if people like an idea or not by launching a Steam page for it. And then maybe if people aren't digging it, you could just take the Steam page down and try a different Steam page. That's actually not crazy. It just requires you to be not wedded to particular ideas, and that can be quite difficult when you're a personal creator and you're very personally wedded to a particular idea. So
yeah, I get it when it's like your passion project, and it's usually a lot of game developers, especially like in Game Dev Unlocked, they're moonlighting, like they do make their game after they're working full time. So I get like it's hard to like not be wedded to an idea, but I think you can have both. In my experience, you can have the best of both worlds if you can compromise certain things. And I call it like wisely compromising your values. Because like I made the first tree and I wanted to make a game like Journey. Like I loved that game. And then it quickly became clear to me that my game would not be anything like Journey. Because how could I recreate the efforts of like the most talented artists in the industry working for 5 years in a big team when I was just working by myself for 2 years and I had a full-time job. So, but it still worked out. I still you have to get the game presentable, I think, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's what I tell people, like just get the parts of your idea that are most exciting and maybe cut out all the rest and try to keep it small.
Yeah, and I think finishing the game is important, but I would also say, like, I don't think you should be too mercenary about this. You're right. If it's your personal creation, you shouldn't be like A/B testing 8 ideas. You should just be going with the idea that you're the biggest fan of, and then thinking very carefully about the right way to present it, because that is something I've noticed. I think if you're much more upfront about like what the game plays like and what the style of game is, and maybe other types of games in similar genre that people might like, then that can be really good. And it's much more direct marketing versus sometimes people get a little lost in, I think, their game's story or or what they think their game's message is. And that doesn't market so well. I think you do need to get a little bit more towards what's the actual gameplay? What do you actually do? And that's sort of the message people are looking at. And then you can sneak the really cool story stuff in later.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, thank you. I just realized I've been saying GIF and you're saying GIF, which I think is the correct way. I hope. Probably
it's actually right, so I don't think that's a problem.
Probably people to comment will be sure to correct me. I hear GIF and I think of GIF peanut butter. Okay, moving on. I would love to hear Simon's thoughts on how to determine the pricing of your game. I'm sure this plays a huge part in marketing and discoverability.
I think it does. I mean, it definitely plays a huge part in how much money you end up making off your game, if nothing else. And I do think a lot of people try to underprice their game. I'm definitely a believer in if you have a decent sized game and a good game, you should be charging a little bit more. And I think for me, $14.99 is sort of the minimum price. And I suggest most people price their game ideally at $20. Obviously, if it has enough in it. And the reason for I think people aren't so keen on that sometimes I think people feel like their game doesn't deserve a higher price point. I think a lot of people are quite like modest, or maybe they have a little bit of imposter syndrome, so they sort of think, oh no, my game can't be worth that.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, and I would push back on that, because I think as long as it's sufficient, as long as it's not 1.5 or 2 hours long, as long as it gives you a good amount of gameplay, I think people are very happy to pay that amount. And the great thing about that is you can use your discounts further down the road to entice even more people to play it. So if you do launch at $20 and maybe only 1,000 people buy it, that's fine, because a bunch more people are going to buy it when you do it 50% off in in a year or so. So I think if you can think of it like that, then I think, yeah, you do want to be a little bit more aggressive. I do think some people think their game will sell better at a lower price point, and my view on this is that actually that's not generally true, and you need to do the math. Like, would your game sell twice as many copies at $10 as $20? In general, I would say no. But obviously it depends how many copies you thought your game was going to sell in the first place. So yeah. And then finally, I feel like there's a link between price and quality in some people's minds. So I do think some people will see a $5 game and they'll be like, oh, well, they're only charging $5 for it. It must be like a little hobbyist project or something. Whereas if you do charge more, like luxury goods charge more, right? So I think it's reasonable to claim that you're a luxury good of your game, and so you should be a little bit, a little bit pricey with this. That's all the reasons I think you should be, you should be a bit more aggressive with your pricing.
Yeah, I agree on like the sweet spot on price, and I do think $5 games. Not sure like. I would hope that you can at least price it to $10. This is just a counterpoint, because I agree with you, but I've thought of these indie games that were like sub $10 prices, and they really like made an impact, that they almost went viral. And I think it was because it was an impulse buy. And that was kind of the logic I put behind the first tree, where I was like, okay, if it's like this, the beautiful kind of open world, colorful exploration game, and if it was just, I set it initially at $8, which I actually regret. I think it should have been $10 from the start. And I got that number. First of all, I did like survey my audience on Steam, and I did a bunch of forums. I was like, how much would you pay for this game if it was 2 hours? And you wouldn't believe the amount of responses I got that said, well, my rule of thumb is $1 per hour of gameplay, so I'd probably pay $3 for it. And I didn't agree with that. I was like, no, like I love short story-driven games, and I'll pay $20 for Firewatch. Like I'm happy to pay that for those kind of games that are shorter but good one-time experience. But yeah, I had the people telling me, oh, like maybe $5. And then I did see other developers, and the ones I'm thinking of, A Short Hike was $8. Yep. Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy was $8. And then there was another a 35 millimeter, which is like takes place in Russia. It's like a story-driven first-person adventure game, and that was $6 or $8. and they all did well. Like they had thousands of reviews, and that's what I was concerned about. I was like, I want the first tree to get momentum, and if it's an impulse buy, maybe that would help it do that. So I don't. And then one other thing is there's another indie game I really like called A Mortician's Tale. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I know that game. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that game, and it was short and sweet. I think it was like an hour and a half long, and it was $15. Like you were saying, and the review score tanked because it was just tons of people mad that it was an hour long for $15. So let me clarify this with you. Like, do you think to be $15, the game has to be at least 2 to 3 hours?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's some exceptions. There's a game called Nuts. I don't know if you've seen this game.
Yeah, Nuts. Yeah,
that's a $20 game, and that is, I believe, only 2.5 hours long because it was made originally for Apple Arcade, and it has very positive reviews.
Oh, yeah.
It has a decent amount, like the amount I would have expected for the game. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have expected to have 1,000 reviews at $5 or something. So it's just a question of like, yeah, you have to work out. I do think, yeah, under 2 hours, it starts to get sketchy to put it over $10 probably. Yeah, I would agree with that. But I also think that like sometimes there's just a certain amount of people who would play your game. So and ultimately, if people play your game when it's $5, that's great. Launch it at $15 and do a 66% off sale in a year and a half, and they can still pay $5 for it. That's sort of my challenge. But I would say for solo devs who are making more modest like itch style games, then maybe $8 to $10 is a better point. I tend to work with kind of like you know, a lot of the time I'm advising mid-sized publishers who've kind of got games that maybe they need to gross hundreds of thousands of dollars to break even. So at that point, I will always tend towards the $20 price point. But if it's more like a solo project and you just want people to see it, then yeah, maybe $6 to $10 is still fine. I still think if you have a decently long game, especially if it's replayable in some way, then edging it up towards $15 is good. I think Dicey Dungeons, which is a really good game, was cheaper than I thought, because that's hella replayable, and I can't remember how much you put it out for, but it's definitely a little bit cheaper than I would have. So.
Yeah, I think of Hollow Knight, how that was 15 hours, or it's $15, and I put 40 hours into it, and that game is a work of art. To me, that should have been $20, but I guess they just wanted to go for the reach. I don't know. It was such a good game, though.
Yeah, it's so difficult because you can't A/B test. You can't A/B test your game launch, right? You can't be like, well, if I'd just done this, then it would have been completely different. And I do worry sometimes people will price it more expensive, and then the game doesn't sell, and then they will blame it on that. And I just have no way to disprove that. So that's why you have to be careful, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I love No More Robots. I think they're killing it. I love how many awesome games they're releasing a year. It's a lot. It's cool, like how fast an indie game studio can go when they're like got the talent behind it. So big fan of No More Robots.
It's actually, like No More Robots releases a little bit more stuff than other people, but they've definitely got a lot of interesting stuff coming up. There's a game called Let's Build a Zoo they have coming up.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That looked cool.
I think it might do quite well. It's like a zoo simulator. It has some kind of, it's very cutesy, but it has some very dark underpinnings. So we'll
really, I haven't heard that. Okay, that's that hook you were talking about. That actually, I was like, what is he talking about? I'm going to have to check that out. All right, we got some smaller questions, Simon. Some like quick hard hitters, if you don't mind. I'm curious to know how important the name of the game is for discoverability and marketing. Right now, if you Google our game name, the first results are of Baby Strollers. The company has a similar name. And our Twitter handle is the third result. Should we be concerned about this?
Well, I think name clashes are a potential concern, but not necessarily a super big deal. There is the trademark system in the US, so you have to take that a little bit seriously. But it tends to be for specific types of product. So I'm guessing that the baby stroller company has it trademarked for baby strollers and not games. But you sort of have to have a quick look at that just to make sure no one has the same thing trademarked for games. And it probably isn't confusing for the other consumers. Really, the company's only ever going to go after you on it, or at least send you a rude letter if they feel like it's confusing for consumers. So in the end, I don't think it's a super big deal, especially because a lot of people are going to be searching on Steam maybe, or they'll be searching for game in the title as well. So I think you can get away with it, but it's definitely the kind of thing where you just need to think a little bit carefully about it, just to make sure that you won't be either confusing people or having a lot of your Google foo taken away by other other entities.
Yeah, I think I just realized I almost always search game in Google when I'm searching for the title of a game. So I think it sounds like most people do that too. So I agree with you. I don't think it's a huge issue. All right. What is the best way to approach marketing as a solo developer whose game doesn't have strong visuals? I'm not really a visual artist, so this has been a challenge for me.
Well, I mean, I actually don't know that strong visuals and always a problem nowadays. You know, you look at games like SNKRX or Snake RX, whatever how you say that. I mean that game is like a Snake auto battler roguelite, and that game has I mean, they're stylish graphics, but it's not like they're amazing pixel art or anything. So, for me, the concept is way more important nowadays than the visuals. So, I think if you have a really strong concept. Like that game, Luck Be a Landlord or something. It's a slot machine roguelike.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, there's all kinds of games out there that are interesting, but don't necessarily have the best art. So I think the key is like, what is your conceptual differentiator if you don't have the best art? And I think if you have something that is strong and maybe replayable or maybe has a really interesting idea in it, then you needn't worry so much about that. I do think, though, to our point earlier about visual media, quite a lot of the places we're suggesting that you advertise or put up GIFs or what have you are visual mediums, so that it does make it a little bit rougher, but I don't think it stops like streamers picking you up if the game is hella fun to play. So I think that's really the card you have to play.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's something I tell the GDU students is like the killer combo you can get with an indie game idea and you're trying to market it is striking visuals and a killer hook, like you were saying. But it sounds like what you're also saying is if you can get the hook to compensate for like those lesser striking visuals, then you could make it. It's just the hook has to be really good. It has to be killer. And I agree with that too.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right. For using platforms like TikTok and Twitter, where short, catchy videos are king, do you think it would be detrimental to make short, catchy videos that have nothing to do with your game's mood overall, but will that get eyes on it?
I think doing goofy stuff can really work. And I think one thing about TikTok is doing kind of irreverent stuff that isn't very serious about promoting your game is something that works great. I mean, I think if you look at Victoria Tran's work over on the Among Us TikTok, she's done her punches. It's pretty funny and sometimes doesn't even reference the game a whole bunch. I mean, it has kind of, game characters from the game in it, but I think she's done a good job there. So I think as long as you're sort of referencing the game in some way, you don't want to do like a off-topic, a crazy video that has nothing to do with the game, because then people probably will never notice, especially because people don't always go to your TikTok channel. They just sort of, just sort of see it out of context. But yeah, I think doing wacky stuff is good. And I think being witty on TikTok in particular and some of these visual media is really important, because there's a lot of very serious videos. It's about kind of personality.
Yeah, I love Victoria Tran's work. It's always so funny and witty. I wish I could be that witty. But yeah, me too. I totally agree with that. People are looking to be entertained, I think, on social media. And if you can just show them like, hey, you're entertained, here's what I'm working on. And also, we'd love to get your support on making this game. And yeah, I just see it even with, have you heard of Danny, the YouTuber? He has like 2 million subscribers and he makes really funny, fast-paced videos making games. And he always plugs his game Carless on Steam. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I'm aware of Carlson because I give it as an example, because we have a data back end where we talk about games that we think are going to do well on Steam based on their wish list and their follows before release. And I always mention like Carlson is in, I think, the top 20 right now in terms of wish lists and followers for like unreleased games. And I'm always like, you might not have heard of this.
Yeah.
I'm like a really big YouTuber and I actually don't follow his channel, but I definitely know his game. So it's a great example of, and obviously we'll see he needs to follow through and make a good game as well. Yeah. But he's obviously setting it up incredibly well because he has a following and his videos are really wacky and interesting, and it really helps people go and check out and wish list this game. So
yeah, totally. Thank you. What is Simon's recommendation regarding Kickstarters versus regular release when it comes to a game store's algorithm? Will Kickstarter hurt the launch algorithms as a lot of people already have bought the game on Kickstarter? And if so, are Kickstarters still worth it?
I mean, I think Kickstarters are good for building a community, and I wouldn't not do it because you're worried about the fact it is true you have to give your Kickstarter backers free Steam keys. So there's some stuff around that where if a lot of them are reviewing it around launch, it won't count towards your review totals and stuff like that. But for me, I think if you have those guys redeeming it, you don't have anyone else, then that's almost like more of a problem. So I actually wouldn't say don't do a Kickstarter because of that. But I do think you have to think about Kickstarters quite carefully, because I think Kickstarters can sometimes be a great way to start off a game's development, but they can also be a bit of a heavy weight around your neck from the point of view of you sort of end up setting up a whole separate set of people who've paid money already and they're looking for results. And also you have to fulfill sometimes a lot of complex deliverables. And so I think, if you were to ask people who did Kickstarters, I think some of them would say like, well, yeah, we had to slip the game, and then that was really stressful because our Kickstarter backers kind of got mad at us, or we didn't update them enough. And you have to do that in addition to you'll be running a Discord at the same time. So then you have to sort of juggle two communities. So I think Kickstarters are not like a slam dunk anymore, especially now you have Discord as well. I think if you need the money, and you can make, a lot of Kickstarters can probably make $25,000 to $50,000 if you've done a good job of them. So if you really need that $50,000 and you're not giving too much of it out again in physical rewards that you have to send to people, then I think it can definitely be worth it. But just be aware that these are definitely people who are now have a lot of opinions about your game and are quite invested because they've literally given you money at the start of the process. So that's sort of that's sort of the minus, but the plus is they're very bought in, so they will be big fans of your game. So yeah,
that makes perfect sense. I've never done a Kickstarter, but everything I've heard from it is that if you go too crazy on rewards and promises, it can be the end of you. So that's what I would recommend other devs. Like, just take it easy on the rewards. And I think the feeling I'm getting from this, Simon, is that Discord is awesome. That's like the new hot way to like build a community and market. And you're really enjoying TikTok and like the visual platforms out there, which that's kind of the gist I'm getting to. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of like right now what I'm super excited about are Discord, TikTok, and other visual media and streamers. And I think those are the things that are powering a lot of the discovery. And there's still a lot of people who are sort of in the, Twitter press releases to editorial outlets world. And I think that works a bit, but it's really not got the juice that those other things do nowadays.
That's fascinating. No, thank you for sharing that. All right, moving on. I think this is the last question. One question I have is about community building. It seems my Steam wishlist numbers have been outdoing my number of Twitter followers and Discord members, while both are linked on the Steam page. Follower member numbers are each about 15% of my wishlist numbers. Is this a normal trend for games that end up doing well on Steam?
So, I mean, I'm definitely a big data nerd for like, how can you predict that games do well on Steam? And actually, as part of my Game Discover Co newsletter, I have a paid section where you get access to all my data on kind of, what's happening before launch. And we actually we haven't integrated it all the way in, but we do have Twitter and Discord that we're manually pulling for some of these games. And what I found, to be honest, is that Twitter and Discord numbers are a bit all over the place compared to Steam success. So I would say, firstly, don't worry. You should not expect your Twitter and Discord to map to your Steam wish list like 100%. Absolutely not. I think that 15% number sounds pretty fine. And also, I just think they're very different kind of, very different filter bubbles or very different media. So I think that shouldn't be a concern for you. I think the main thing is, the main thing you should think about is, are you getting new people coming into your Discord regularly, and are you getting regular new organic wish lists? I'm a big fan of kind of organic wish lists, which is, you're not doing much and you're still getting ideally 20, 30, 40 Steam wish lists every day. That's sort of the ideal situation. So I actually think that, for games that end up doing well, the thing I've noticed the most, and the one thing I say to my clients and the folks who read my newsletter is, if you're getting 100 wish lists a day and you're doing nothing, then I think your game's going to do quite well on Steam. And if you're getting 2, then I think your game's not going to do so well. And and the reasons for that obviously are incredibly complicated, and I don't claim to know why. But I think that's really, really, really a good thing to track. I think wishlist and follower numbers on Steam, if you have your game on Steam, are really a great way to look at how you think you're doing, and you can increase those numbers. But I wouldn't worry too much about wishlist mapping to your Twitter or Discord.
That's interesting. it can be done, increasing those wish list numbers. I do think it takes experimenting. I do think it takes trying different channels, different techniques, different types of images you export and screenshots and GIFs and all that. But I do think it's possible. I guess the last thing I'd ask you is, right now, if there's a game developer out there right now is probably listening, and they have a game, it's their passion. It's like they love it so much, they want to share it with the world, but they're only getting 2 wish lists a day, which that's a pretty common number I hear, and that usually doesn't lead to an explosive launch. Like, what would you tell them to do in a short, succinct answer, I guess?
Well, I think they should take a careful look at their game and what genre it's in and what the differentiating aspects are. And I think they should do their very best to play up whatever makes it both unique, but also similar. I know this is going to sound like doing 2 things at the same time, but I actually think, you want to say, here's the twist in my game. But a lot of the time, games sell well because they're like other games that people have already played and enjoyed. So I think that's really, you need to strip things back to the root of what your game is. And it isn't, and the issue often, if you have got a couple of wish lists a day, is people are, if people play the game, they might love it. A lot of these games are really good. But what's the hook? What's the thing that you're telling people that makes them want to play the game without, maybe their friend plays it and tells them it's great. That's awesome. But obviously word of mouth, you need enough people for word of mouth to happen. Otherwise you can't get word of mouth. So I think, say succinctly, just go back to your base idea and really just try and give it another look and try and work out if you're really showing it off visually and concept wise to its best effect. Even maybe tweak it a little bit if you don't think you are, because otherwise, unless you end up having a game that really streamers go all over and it really goes viral, which does happen sometimes for very, very kind of compelling games, then you may be a little bit stuck at launch, or guess what? It might just be a chance for you to say, hey, I like that game and now I've learned something and I can try again with a different game. That's the nice thing about game dev. You can just switch over and start again.
That's awesome. What a great answer. I totally agree with that. To all the developers listening, I love Simon's newsletter, Game Discover Co. Please sign up for it. Simon, I've subscribed to a lot of newsletters in my life, and yours is the only one I've literally read every single email. I read it from top to bottom. So thank you for making it. Everyone subscribe to it. It's the most valuable indie marketing discoverability newsletter out there. Simon knows his stuff. He knows his numbers. And there is there's a paid section too, which I paid for. Totally worth it. You get access to Game Discover Co. Plus. And I'll put a link in that in the description. You can't ignore marketing. You need to pay attention to the numbers, to the trends, but it is possible. Like, it's time well spent. It will take a few failures. It will take a few successes. It will take some pivoting, but it's totally possible. So yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to add, Simon?
No, it's just great. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's nice for me to kind of hear questions and comments from your students and other folks, because it's really nice to hear. Like I do a lot of work with kind of like maybe medium-sized devs and publishers, and it's really interesting to hear. I mean, a lot of the questions honestly are very similar so I think it's great to try and answer them in as helpful way as I can. And again, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're on the cusp of like this huge new solo dev revolution as consoles become easier to port to, and as the game engines become more accessible and all these things. Like, I think there's a huge small team revolution going to happen in indie games soon. But you gotta put in the work, and you gotta put in the effort and the data analysis, but it is possible. So thanks for your efforts. I love your newsletter, and thanks for being on the show, Simon.
Thanks, appreciate it.